Welcome back once again to teleSUR English. We were talking with the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, welcoming here to Cuba, to Havana, and we'll continue the conversation. You were mentioning some of the bigger challenges that the region is facing has to do with climate change and the way that the climate crisis worldwide has a significant impact in this region. So I wanted to ask you on that in particular. You're co-hosting an important summit as well in the coming days regarding sustainability and the perspective of island nations in this topic. So why is it important to push this conversation forward, and why is it important to have it from an island nation perspective?
It's very important for a number of reasons. We are small island developing states. We are in the middle of the ocean, surrounded completely by water. We are on the front line of climate change. Where others might be speculating whether climate change is real or not, we see it and experience it on a daily basis. And what the world must understand is that the cost of climate change is too much for any one country to face. For example, in my country, St. Kitts and Nevis, we have seen irregular rainfall, and that has led to periods of drought and scarcity of water. We never thought that we would ever be a water scarce country, but today we are considered one of the most water scarce country, one of the more water scarce country because of climate change. We see our crops being affecting our food security. Our beaches, some of them are disappearing. We see sargassum or seaweed, on our beaches, affecting its beauty and affecting our tourism. We see the temperatures rising significantly, causing us to use more energy to keep houses cool and buildings cool, which has increased significantly the cost of energy. All these things, and then the impact on health, significant, stronger hurricanes, more frequent storms. One storm can wipe out 100% of our GDP. One storm. And so we are really at the peril of nature with respect to climate change. And that is why we are calling for climate justice. Why climate justice? We did not create the problem. We don't contribute to the problem. It's very negligible. As a matter of fact, our ocean and our forests, I think, taking more of carbon dioxide from than what we produce. So therefore, we are naturally helping the problem, yet we suffer the most. So it's not a question of pity or handouts. We're not asking for those things. We are proud people. We're asking for justice, climate justice. And so we are saying to the world, and especially what we term to be the industrialized world that is responsible for this problem, we're asking them to be on the front line to resolve the problem. And so that is why it's important that those who suffer most and contributed less should be at the front line, advocating fiercely for climate justice. And so to that extent, that is why we are hosting the GSIS, the Global Sustainable Island Summit, which was last held in Prince Edward Island in Canada. I went there and met with the governor in Canada for Prince Edward Island. And Island Innovation is now bringing it to St. Kitts and Nevis. And we want to use that summit, that platform, to continue to call for climate justice, but to build solidarity with like-minded people so that we can find real solutions. So that summit will not be about complaining about climate justice. It will be about finding solutions to the climate crisis. And so I would like to invite teleSUR. You are invited. As you know, you covered teleSUR English, cover the Caribbean. This is a major summit in the Caribbean, and teleSUR is also invited. But that is important for us to continue to call for climate justice and to build solidarity around the issue so that we can find solutions for all of our peoples.
We'll definitely keep in mind and and be looking out for what is happening in that summit in the coming days. And you were talking about the necessity of finding solutions. And we were talking about internationalism before. And this is, of course, an international struggle, something that cannot be solved by just one nation alone. But as you were saying, it's a complex challenge that hits some the hardest. So in terms of the international arena, what are the concrete steps that could be taken? There are some mechanisms that are already enforced but have to be put into action. What should we look in terms of international cooperation to find solutions to these problems?
First of all, I think we have started the process to establish that there's climate change, and climate change is caused by the activity of man. That has to be established. And I think there's great work there, even though there are some deniers. Now we have what you call COP28, where all the countries come together to really discuss the issues of climate change and to find solutions. What are the impacts and what are the solutions? And I want to encourage that whatever resolutions come from COP, that they are followed through. Because many instances there are pledges of billions of dollars. And then when you look at what is actually collected, it's a small drop in the bucket, which says there is no real commitment to dealing with the climate issue. That is a concrete step that can be taken so that the countries that are affected most can have the resources to build resilience and, of course, to continue their path of development and to decrease significantly their vulnerability to the climate change. In addition to that, there are some specific things that we would like to be accepted, such as loss and damage as a concept, so that that can help us to have access to financing, concessionary financing and grants to help us to really build climate resilience. However, it has been recently advanced to be accepted even more. And then we're asking that instead of judging us on our GDP per capita, because we're small economies, so our GDP per capita does not tell the real story, because we're small economies. Our GDP per capita might seem high, but the economies are small. And so we're asking that we be judged on something called the multi-vulnerability index, where you look at our vulnerability and you determine if we should have access to grants and concessionary lending. We think those things can help tremendously, and to look at what we would say the financial architecture as was put forward by the Bridgetown Accord that has in it at its root financial justice that would help to really deal with the scourge of climate change that's affecting countries like us here in the region as island developing states. So I think that there are some concrete things that can take place to open up access to financing, access to grants, and of course to help to push forward at the United Nations level, I would say, certain matters that can favorably impact how climate change is being seen and dealt with in small island developing states. So I think those are some concrete. But outside of that, even if those things were not to happen, we are not going to just sit by as sitting ducks and be at the mercy of climate change. We are going to fight back, and we're going to build solidarity with those who are serious about changing the way in which we approach the issue of climate change. And Cuba is one of those countries who that is positioned really to build that type of solidarity with, to help to deal with this scourge, this new crisis, man-made crisis, the crisis of climate change.
You were just talking about the financial justice as well. And I think it's very important to make clear that idea that the climate injustice does not only have to do with those natural disasters, but has a direct impact on the economies, particularly of these nations that we are talking about. Could you explain a little bit more on that? How does the climate crisis in islands, in nations like the Caribbean islands, impact that economy? And why does that need to change? What are you advocating for a change in the financial architecture, for example?
Exactly. So, for example, we know the cost, or it has been estimated, of what will be the cost to deal with what we call adaptation to climate change. That cost is multiple times our GDP, which means by ourselves we'll never be able to afford it. However, we still don't have access to concessionary lending, and we don't have access to grants, for example. The financial architecture works against us. And if that does not change, the chances of us having access to the necessary financial resources based on the current structure will be very challenging. And so we will not be able to really access the type of resources to deal with the climate change matter. And that is why we want a change in the financial architecture. The way you judge us, do not judge us by GDP per capita. Consider loss and damage, the multi-vulnerability index. When you talk about insurance of our countries, where the cost of living is going to go up because there are insurance companies who will not insure our countries because of the fear of severe storms that can affect the countries and, of course, affect their bottom line. So this climate crisis is almost creating the perfect recipe for us not to be countries, or for us not to exist from a physical perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And that is why we are saying that the architecture must change. And again, I'll refer anyone to the Bridgetown initiative that has in it practical ways that can be adopted to deal with the issue of the financial injustice in the world today.
It's clear. And just final thoughts before we wrap today. Are you confident that solidarity can find those solutions that we need?
Yes, there's always hope. There's hope. We have to continue with that great hope in humanity that we must never, ever lose. If we lose hope, we lose it all. But I also believe that we have the capacity to respond. As human beings, we have responded over the centuries. And I also believe in God. And with God's help, I'm sure that we'll overcome. But it takes great work. We must work towards it. So I'm sure that the solidarity will continue to build because we have seen tremendous movement. I'm in Cuba now, and I met with the president. And of course, there's greater solidarity there. Later this year, we'll have the CARICOM meeting, where all of CARICOM, which are 14 nations in the Caribbean, will come together, building greater solidarity. Later that year, we would, of course, have CARICOM and Cuba Summit, building greater solidarity. And of course, across the whole of Latin America, where we have CELAC and ALBA, where we'll continue to build solidarity. St. Kitts and Nevis is a country that seeks to build solidarity with all nations so that together we can create a better world for all of us. So solidarity is a must if we are to survive the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us today in teleSUR English. It's been our pleasure.
And it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So we were speaking with the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Terrance, here in teleSUR English. We will continue updating on more of these topics. Of course, stay tuned for further interviews. And for now, thank you for joining us.